Can you hear me? And you can see me.
You're good.
Oh,
Hey,
and I just heard, I
I'm
heard
gonna be
you.
doing Jen. I've Sandy and I talked. We're gonna have me do the book of Genesis for the milestone.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's a great book undertaking. Good for you.
Yes.
And a lot of really good material on that too. We'll kind of wait for everybody to come in here, guys. While we're doing that, I have it's always in more. I'm gonna throw out. Can you see the poll question? Okay. So you guys can throw out answers to that while we're kind of waiting for everybody to show up. Just a technical question. Can you guys hear people talking in my house, or Or is that kind of that background
Yeah.
noise not?
No, Zoom blocks that out.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so while we're kind of waiting for other people to show up, let me see what else we have for participants. Here's Jaden and Lawson are in. While we're doing that, I'm gonna just take a quick attendance for today. Oh, not, oh, that's there. Okay. Sandra, Alberg, I see. Karina Cram. Somebody who is in the with the church group. If you're in that, make sure you say
Yeah, no, Karina. She's not a
okay.
part of us.
Okay, Charity Crosby. Okay. Josh Dewey.
Part of our group, not here.
Okay, Daniel Jensen or
Yes.
Jansen.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Jansen.
Yes.
Caleb Luttenegger. Luton.
Close enough. Yes.
I'm just going to try to slaughter your names as bad as I can possibly slaughter them. That is okay. Say that name.
Lutenegger.
Oh, okay. I was kind of close. Okay, Derek Mueller and Reagan Mueller.
Part of us, not here.
Anna Lee Niles.
Here.
Is it Anna or Anna?
Anna Lee.
All right. Mark Niam. I don't know how to say that name. Okay. Dorothy Pratt. Natalie Pratt.
Yes.
Maggie Rauschel.
No. No, but her husband Tim is here if you have Tim.
Okay, does that count since they're one? Like, does it count?
I think it pretty much counts.
I'm giving it to her.
She's giving it to her. She's here.
Maggie's there. Way to go, Tim. Way to bring it for the team. Lori Schmidt.
Yes.
Stephanie Sward.
Yes.
Okay, Catherine Wegreffy. Oh man, you guys, come on.
No, that was spot on. Yes.
Okay. That's about killing me. And then let me get to the other class. Aiden Fisher.
Yep.
Campbell Lawson or Lawson Campbell. I think I saw him in here. Melinda Crick. Melissa Gardner.
She is not here. Nope.
Okay.
She was
Okay, Deborah Gray. Wanda Holler. Ben LaRange.
Ben is not with us. He's with us, but he's not here.
He might be online.
Ben, are you online?
I don't know that I see him.
Okay.
I should probably get into the
Sometimes he's online, but we don't see him either.
okay. Trevor McGinnis.
I'm here.
Great. Do you have Jaden with you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Jordan Oder, I think I brought him in. Parker, is it Rabe?
Sure, Robbie.
Robbie.
I'll go
And then
Rabe.
there's now Tim. So Tim gets counted twice. I know Joseph is here. Jaden, Andrew Stadler,
With us, but not here.
and Aria Urban.
I'm here.
Oh, great. Okay, that's what is there anybody that I didn't list? Good. We'll get if anybody pops in at some point in time, just don't be afraid to mention it so that I can make sure
Yo.
it helps me know.
So Lawson was just in here, but his audio wasn't working. So he's gonna try a different way.
Okay. I think I did count him because I thought I saw his
Okay.
Yeah, Lawson Campbell. Yeah, I got him. Sweet. Okay, guys. So Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Criminy, could we cover enough material in 1 week? Right? Like that's a huge chunk. I was like feeling for you guys, but some fun stuff and some interesting stuff. And I thought the lectures, the profs did a nice job with summarizing all of that into some smaller things. How are you guys enjoying the Bible Project overview videos? Are you liking that? Great. No, I'm hearing north side, you're not liking that? Did I see somebody head go like this?
I think we have thumbs up all around.
Oh, okay, good. I just, as I was prepping for the class, I just like, if there's a way, when you have a tool that you're like, man, I really like using the tool. It's nice to not have to reinvent the wheel, but also it's a tool that is offered for free because they're a nonprofit and they're doing that for free. And it's good material and it's something that you all can turn around and use in your spheres and in your ministries and things like that too. So, but I really, they do a nice job and it's a nice quick, what I did today just to kind of, what I did today just to kind of do a review. I watched them in double speed. Have you ever done that? Watch the videos in double speed? Oh man, it was so much fun because that hand's just going so fast. It's drawing. It's like, ooh, this is kind of so. I did watch it in normal speed as well earlier, but today I was like, I'm just gonna watch those real fast again. And so if you're short on time or you're just like you're falling asleep or whatever, double speed is kind of fun. So there's a tip from this side of the camera. All right. Well, a few things I want to just make sure that we kind of go over and talk about. I've got a lot of questions for us tonight. So I'm hoping that we spend some decent time in our discussion groups. Here's my recommendation for you guys in those discussion groups. I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to kind of talk. So those of us that have been around the block a few times and have some knowledge and have some experience and things like that, our job is then to make sure that we aren't kind of reteaching the material. The discussion group is not a time for any of us to kind of be teaching. It's a time for us to kind of massage the material and talk about it and everybody's ideas and thoughts kind of weaving in there. If you come across something in that time that you're like, I don't know what to do with that, then when we get back together as a whole group, we can talk about that. If it's something that I've got background in, I was like, and I can help you with that, I will. If it's not, I'll write it down and I'll do some research for you and we can come back to it and I'll email that to you. Like I said, so in my Psalms exegesis class in my MDiv program, I'm a storyteller, so I'm just gonna tell you some stories tonight. But we had to go around the class and everybody had to choose a psalm. And then that psalm, we had to exegete the whole psalm and we had to decide how it should be translated. And then we had to present it in an hour and a half presentation to the class, like one of the lectures, and basically defend the exegesis that we did and the choice of translation and all that type of stuff. And so we get into these, on the day that we chose, I was in a classroom and I sat way, way back in the I probably pulled in late or something. I don't know, but I sat way in the back and the very back corner. And he starts the list of Psalms that we get to choose from at the front opposite corner of me. So by the time it got all the way through the class and came to me, the last person, there were like 3 Psalms that I could choose from on this list of Psalms that he gives on. And I kind of perused the Psalms real fast on those 3 that he gave. And one was like, it was a tome. It's like 119, right? It's just like, I am not exegeting that. And then the other one, I don't know why, but I chose Psalm 68. And so the first 4 scholarly reviews that I went and researched and was looking at just to start kind of my study process on this psalm, every single one of them started their review with some kind of phrase that sounded like this. Psalm 68 is notoriously the most difficult psalm in the book of Psalms to translate and exegete. And I'm like, that's great. I'm glad I chose that psalm. And so went through the whole thing. There's whole like sections that the original text or the earliest text that we had didn't even have, or it was compromised in some way. And so they're kind of guessing at some of, to kind of fill in the blanks by context. You're looking at context, and there were like, I don't know how many one-time used words was in this, and it was a nightmare. And when I got into my presentation, my hour-and-a-half presentation, the first thing I did was this was in the projector days. We didn't even have like PowerPoint. So the first thing I did was slap a transparency on the projector, and it had several of these quotes saying this is, like, this is such a hard, and this is a, and then the last quote was from me. And my quote was, what the heck am I doing trying to translate this psalm? And after every quote, I quoted the person, I quoted, their Old Testament scholar or what, their background. And behind my name, I just put Old Testament kindergartner. And and I tell you that story because if nothing else, that exegesis project for me helped me realize how sacred the process of exegeting and understanding the word is, how significant it is to do it in community, but also how I will always stand before the word feeling like a kindergartner, right? I will always come to the word, and because it's so vast, and it's quite a task to undertake it. And so no matter what kind of background and work I've done and things like that, I always come to it in a place of humbleness, just going, I definitely can learn. So I tell you that story because I just want you to understand that my heart is a heart that I say, I may not remember everything about the Old Testament and the old, survey and Old Testament theology and things like that, but I'll dig into it with you if I don't have any background in that, and I'll be honest about that with you guys too. So don't be afraid to ask, and I won't be afraid to say, yeah, don't know anything about that. Let's figure it out, and we can figure that out together. Sound great? I think we got a couple more people in here, and I gave you a poll. Did some of you answered that? Did the rest of you get that poll? I'm going to leave that open for a little bit longer. Okay. All right. So we got a lot of ground to cover tonight, and I just want to cover some of the highlights and get us thinking and asking some questions. So and one of the first questions that I have for you is, and for us to kind of talk about, is going into the Exodus story. And when it comes, does anybody have a problem with the plagues? No? Does anybody know anybody in their spheres of influence and friends that have trouble with the plagues?
Like trouble believing they happened?
No, the behind it, because the Old Testament is revealing us the character of God, right? And so does anybody, have you ever been asked, how can God just, like, how can he just kill the firstborn all across the nation? Like, what kind of God does that? And I think one of the lectures really brought out that question about the violent nature of the plagues. And I'm wondering if you, in just normal life, talking about your faith and things like that, or in your studies, have you ever come across somebody saying, "What in the world? How can that happen? How do we explain the violent nature of the plagues, and justify it with a God that we call loving and merciful?"
I've had that question a couple times, yeah.
Mhm.
So, and the killing later on in the wars and when they get to Canaan too. Yeah,
Right, wiping out nations
right.
and things
mhm,
like that.
Right. hmm
Have you guys ever wondered about that? Any of you guys?
I've had students, there are the other school I go to, there's individual that would get that twisted and everything, and I go, no, it's this way, but he tries and argues back, so I just leave it alone and know what I know and leave it as that.
Hmm. Well, I think I think this is worthy of repeating, and I don't know if you caught it in the lecture, but he raises this. I think it was the Blair. I think it was his lecture. I can't remember, but he
Mhm.
raises that very question about the violent. How do we explain God's violence in the course of the plagues? And he makes two things, and I think it's worthy of repeating, and it's a good place to kind of hang your hat when you're thinking about that. And I have been questioned about that. People have said, how do you explain that, Tay? And he says a couple things. He said God uses violence when the oppressed or the poor are being exploited by those in power. So it's a justice issue, right? And
Mhm.
then also he mentioned that the emphasis shouldn't necessarily be on the punishment but of Egypt, but more on the salvation of Israel. And I think that's true theologically. I don't think that's a great answer to people who are seeking to understand God, especially somebody who's coming um, at into a conversation about faith from a place of non-believing. Like, I don't know that it's hard to say, hey, yeah, this isn't at all about Egypt. It's all about Israel. But if we're
Mhm.
believing it to all be true, which we do, then there was a lot of harm done to not just Pharaoh and his household, who's making those decisions, but and holding, and who has that government, that system having oppressed the Israelites. But it's the nation.
Hmm.
And for me, that begs the question, and this is more of a contemporary question, but for me, that begs the question, what responsibility do we have as people in a nation when our government functions in a way that that continues oppression or uses violence or harms those vulnerable in our society? Am I getting too political? I'm not touching on any political party, don't get me wrong, but um it seems like the punishment that was that God issued out for the in the plagues, it didn't just touch those who were actually in power doing the oppressing. It impacted that whole nation. And other nations, because of their like the Amorites, their time wasn't quite right, and the wickedness and things like that. We see God meting out justice in that way to the whole nation. And it may not have been the whole nation that was in the wrong or had done the oppressing, but so I don't know. Food for thought.
Mhm.
Any thoughts?
some of the, I'll give a thought, some of the killing that they had to do, and you think of the plagues, it took till the 10th plague for the death. And so they had all these chances to repent. They had a chance to go to the Passover too. I think he provided a way if, somebody invited them into their home to be safe. I don't know, but I know later in Canaan, some of the bloodline, with the Nephilim and the fallen angels had affected the bloodlines, and some of that had to be wiped out too, not to intermingle with the Jewish people. But maybe
Yeah.
the way out was to join them in the Passover. I don't know. Yeah, to go to their homes. I don't know.
Yeah,
Although,
and of course that's a lot of, we're doing a lot of speculating and things like that. But it
speculating.
does, but I think that the violence question, both in the plagues and in God's meting out justice through the nation of Israel in the course of the whole Old Testament story, that whole story, people get hung up on that. And
Yeah.
I do think it's worthy of your consideration as you're working through the Old Testament. And that's one of the overriding questions is, how do you see grace? How do you do? Because a lot of times we've, the fallacy for New Testament believers and Christians is we pit the New Testament as the covenant of grace and the Old Testament as the covenant of law, as though there was no grace back here. And my hope is that in the course of our time here, you are able to go back and be able to point out times in the Old Testament where you're seeing the merciful character of God. And that's part of the thing, right? It's not so much about the storyline, but about the plan, the plan in place of God moving through his people to reveal himself, right? It's a revelation and a testimony. So a testament. So we want to keep that in mind. I want to tell you just kind of a fun story about it at the end of the plagues. So if you have your Bibles and you can open them up, and you turn to page, you turn to Exodus 12. And it's at the end of that 10th plague. And 12:29 says, at midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock, even the livestock. Pharaoh arose in the night, he and all his officials, and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud cry in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. Then he summoned Moses and Aaron in the night, and he said, rise up, go away from my people, both you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you said. Take your flocks, take your herds, just as you said, and be gone. And then the NRSV says, that's a period, and then says, and bring a blessing on me too. And the actual Hebrew there for the end of that, and bring a blessing on me too, the actual Hebrew doesn't read like that. It reads, Pharaoh said to Moses, take your flocks and your herds, as you said, and be gone. And then he said, bless me by your leaving. In other words, it's kind of like, don't let the door hit you on the way out. I'm going to be better if you're out of here. So it's kind of, it's kind of a fun, it's not meant to be funny, but it's not, the original didn't read, give me a blessing too. The original read, you're going to bless me by your absence. So get on out. And I just think that that's really funny when the prof that when we first studied Exodus together, that pointed that out, and we were kind of going through the Hebrew of it, and we just got to laughing in class about that. And I actually gave him a fake tombstone that said, here lies Professor so-and-so. He blessed us by his leaving. And so it might be a nice phrase to kind of hang your head on. I was like, you know what? It's a nice way of saying you need to leave. You can bless me by your leaving. Thank you very much. So Exodus 12:32, kind of a fun thing there. This is what I'd like to do. I'd like to move into we're going to have several conversations that kind of start with a question tonight. And so, kind of on the similar vein as the question that rises about God's justice and being meted out on nations in the Old Testament. Another area where we see people question, and that maybe we have some questions, is the harshness of the law. So the question is the Mosaic law harsh, or have you ever called it that? And why do you suppose people would see it that way if they do? So, is the Mosaic law harsh? And have you ever had an experience of anybody saying that? And then why do you suppose people would say that or view it in that way? And so we're gonna jump into, so I'm gonna just put Northside community. You can just go mute if you want to and talk amongst yourselves there. And then let's go, we'll just put everybody else. We've got a smaller group tonight. Just put all of us in, I guess it's room 3. And I'll give you a few minutes to kind of talk about that. And when we get back, maybe you can share. Now, again, remember, everybody has a chance to talk and share. All right. we have everybody back, I think, pretty fast. I didn't mean to kick you out too fast. North side, are you guys done talking a little bit?
Could use another maybe 3, 4 minutes,
Oh, really? Okay, good.
if possible. We were just starting to. If not,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Take some more time. The rest of you like to go back into your breakout room, or were you kind of done?
I mean, you could probably just leave us here, but we could keep talking.
Yeah, you can mute your speaker, north side. We'll wait for you. You guys keep on talking a little bit longer and finish your conversation.
I was saying earlier, I said Sandy would dad a video and we watched it, and it was talking about each of the laws. And I remember one of them she said when she mentioned about the one of the baby, when mentioned, that brought me thinking, and I went to look in the notes that I took on that video, and it brought up memories and had that date on the I put on there teacher Mark, so I knew Sandy was gone that day, and we watched that video in Sunday school, so it was kind of cool. I still have some of her notes from it and everything. The Sandy liked handing us out notes to copy our charts.
Sure.
So when you guys hear Mosaic law, like what is it that you guys actually think of?
Let's hear
Because
from.
I
Go
have
ahead.
heard like often when people refer to Mosaic law, it's like they're referring to the whole Old Testament almost.
Mm,
Pretty much I think of it as we could think of it as the show The Chosen. There's one of the higher priests saying we're not that Jesus wasn't honoring the high Moic law that should be happening. And Jesus pretty much has his own law. And I've seen that conflict from watching that episode. I can't remember what episode that was, but I know it's in season 4 is when he's having the argument about the law.
I think I don't know that very many average people would say that the Mosaic law was harsh. I think they would say the Old Testament, the laws in the Old Testament are harsh, right? And because the Pentateuch delineates most of the laws, I mean, there's other areas where we see that, but that's really the heart of where you see all that. Then you're probably thinking about the Pentateuch, Genesis through Deuteronomy, right? But I think that they see I think when somebody says that or asks that question, they're kind of lumping the whole Old Testament together. So whether it's the law or whether they have trouble kind of like with the violence question that I asked, which is why I'm kind of I'm dovetailing those two things. Because it's kind of the same question. It's a question, and I don't want to get too far ahead before Northside joins in again, but it's a question. It's not as much a question about law as it is about God, right? The question is, who is this God? Like, and it does, there
All right,
are
we're
times
back.
when, okay, great. We were just kind of talking about how maybe the question, I phrased the question purposely the way I did. But maybe the question is, like, most people aren't going to say, how come the Mosaic law is so, they're not going to talk like that, right? But a lot of people will say, why was God so mean? in the Old Testament, or why were the laws so, so harsh, and capital punishment just like not even like it's not even thought about, and things like that. Northside, tell me a little bit about what your discussion and how your discussion went.
Yeah, we had good discussion. We were kind of trying to get our minds around the word harsh, and
Okay.
and well, why would somebody think something is harsh, and why? And we were talking about kind of our history with the Old Testament law, and we see grace in it. We see the high calling in it. We see a lot of different things, but I think kind of just the last thing that got said was that things are harsh. You think something is harsh if you don't respect the person telling you that is demanding of you. And so if your buddy gives you 613 laws to follow, you think, oh, that's kind of harsh. But if the government gives you 613 laws to follow and you respect the government, you're like, okay, yes, I will do it. And so your respect for the giver of the laws determines for you whether you think something's harsh. And so if we look at the laws from a human perspective, like just one human coming to another and giving 613 laws, we're gonna think it's harsh. But if we see that it's God giving humans a chance to live in his presence, and we have a high view of God, it doesn't sound harsh anymore.
Those are good thoughts.
I think this was even included. I think it was in one of the videos, or it was in some of the reading, but it talks about how culturally, like the worship of the time was these deities that you didn't know what would please them or not please them. And excuse me. And with God being so specific with this law, like it could seem overbearing to us, but to them it was God like saying, this is exactly what you need to do. And he was being clear, and that set him apart from the other deities of the time.
Right. Right. Even the plagues in Egyptian culture, the Pharaoh was God, and he was supposed to have control, cosmic control. So he was in control of the natural world. So when God comes against Pharaoh, who's seen in that culture as God, and Pharaoh can't control the natural world, but God is manipulating and controlling the natural world, it proves God is the, King of Kings, the God of all, the God over what Pharaoh presents himself as God, which makes sense why he would say, bless me by your leaving, because pretty soon they're going to know that I'm not a God. And don't confuse my Egyptian, culture, like get out before anybody. That may be tongue in cheek in some ways, but there's a purpose, right? So, we look at the plagues, maybe harsh, maybe violent in some ways, and yet at the same time, we see God when men set themselves up for, like we saw at Babel, right? When men set themselves up to be like God or to be God, God's answer is to show that he really is God, right? And so in this instance, for that purpose, I think that's part of what's happening with the plagues, and in light of the Egyptian culture and things like that. The harshness of the law question, I have gotten that question as well, and sometimes I've wondered that too, like, wow, it seems so strong. And there's when you have a God who is holy, and he is, and we are not, and but we want to be in, he wants us to be in communion, and we do too want to be in communion with him, then some of those laws that would make us would bring an uncleanness or a unholiness and things like that, he's pretty tight on that, right? Because that was part of him dwelling amongst the Israelites. And that's when you kind of get into the temple and all that, the Holy of Holies and all that type of stuff. You get into that, and God's saying, I want to be among you, but in order for us to commune, we have to, you can't bring unholiness and uncleanness into my presence. And so, so that's what all the rituals and the sacrifices and things like that are born out of that, to allow for the people an opportunity to be able to experience the presence of God in a very real way. And they can't do that unless sins are atoned for and all that. And we're kind of getting down the road a little bit, but um, one of the interesting things that I've read a book, and you might pick it up, and it could be it could be a book if you wanted to do a book review or something with your capstone project, you could use it. It's and I think I mentioned it last week, and I'm going to bring it up several times in the course of our study together, but it's The Grammar of God. And again, it's written by a gal who grew up in a practicing Jewish home. And when she started reading the Old Testament in English translations, she realized the difference of how she grew up understanding and hearing it in Hebrew and with the heart and the understanding from a Jewish culture, as opposed to some of the English translations. Not that they're wrong, but more so some of the nuances are lost. And we talked a little bit about that last week. But when it comes to the harshness, one of the things that I was reminded in her book was about the Mishnah, was where the Mosaic law is codified. In other words, it's like extrapolated. It's like, okay, this law means this, and you have to, in order to obey this law, this is what it looks like in real time. This is how you apply that, and that's a bunch of codes and things like that kind of reduces it to a system to kind of follow. The Talmud is volumes and volumes of discussions and arguments that the rabbis, famous scholarly rabbis, over years and years of history have argued and discussed over the meaning of the different ways to implement the law, right? So you have kind of these tomes and tomes, which by the time you get to Christ, that's part of what he comes against, is they were so thick into all those tomes and discussions of the law, and they had got it down to, like you can't walk a mile this way, or you can put your satchel a mile out on before the Sabbath, so that's kind of home, so you can get there and then you can walk the other mile, so you actually can go to, I mean, it's like it was just so reduced to legalism, and they lost the heart of the Father in the process. And the law is, and the Pentateuch was established and written and told over the years for the Father's heart to be revealed to us, right? So by the time Jesus comes on the scene, we're so lost into all those the codification of the law and things like that we've lost kind of the heart that's behind it. And so one of the things that she said, I'm quoting her here, the Talmud is part of the Torah, the oral law, and the law in the Torah itself is not considered the final word. Instead, in Orthodox Jewish homes and practices, they accept both the Torah law or the written law and the oral law. So that's like the Torah and the Talmud are kind of, there's an equivalency between them. Without the commentary of the rabbis, perhaps part of Mosaic law do seem harsh, but no one who grew up immersed in Jewish texts understands an eye for an eye to mean an actual eye for an actual eye. Instead, the idea is to take something equivalent to the harm, which generally means a monetary punishment, right? So we read eye for eye and we think they're plucking out eyes. But in that culture, and even a modern day Orthodox Jew would read that, and in light of their commentary, like we go to commentaries and scholars who have studied the word more than us, and we learn in context. They do that same thing, and an eye for an eye means that there should be just punishment for what was harm, what harm was done, and what was lost. Thoughts, comments? Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I even heard it from my art teacher talking about it. 'Cause I was talking about what I'm learning, and I told her that there, and she was talking about her Jewish culture in the background of that. So it was good to hear that again more in depth from you. It's kind of better to understand from hearing it from both angles.
Right. And so one of the points that this gal makes is that to understand and not go down a rabbit trail and misunderstand it, it's a conversation, right? And you do that, you study and you exegete and you learn about the text in community, kind of like what we're doing here. And what we do by bringing along scholars like the text that we use and commentaries and our exegesis. We don't exegete alone. That's a recipe for, getting way far out here and proclaiming it as truth, right? That's a recipe for the beginnings of a cult, right? But when you stay in the context of community and you test that, you test what you're thinking and what you're learning and what you're thinking, does this mean this? And then, and in community, and the Jewish culture does that, and so does the Christian culture for that matter. So, but we aren't immersed in Jewish culture, right? So we go back and we read something like that, and it can really be misconstrued, which is part of our job, is to get back into that understanding and culture. And the Mishnah and the Talmud are helpful for that, but we don't take that as authoritative, like the Word of God is authoritative, especially the Word of God revealed through Jesus as well. So, Lawson, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just gonna comment on like the idea of eye for an eye. To us, like that might seem harsh, but the reality is like the alternative is often you take my eye, I'm gonna, murder your whole family. And so in that sense, like it stopped the cycle of revenge and that cycle of retribution.
Yes.
So it was like it was designed to be almost a fair system as opposed to this always escalating sense of tension.
Right. And that was actually my next point. So excellent, because if you're and that's the grace part, right? That's part of the grace, is like, yeah, there should be compensation. There should be something done because that what was wrong, but not too much. So yeah, great point, Lawson. Thanks for saying that. That's awesome. Anybody else have any other comments about that? So what are the benefits from learning in community, and what do you see as the cautions? Are there any cautions that we should be aware of, or we should think about?
Well, I happen to like, I think I could tie this back to our text. So I happen to have Exodus 23, which one of the laws says, "You shall not follow a majority in wrongdoing." And it's kind of talking about this idea of like, just because the majority is thinking or doing a certain thing doesn't mean that you should go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think the danger for us is that, we start to fall into this sense of groupthink and, well, everybody else kind of thinks this way, so I'm just going to go along with it because it's safer. So I think there is wisdom in following tradition. I think, if someone has believed something for 2,000 years, there's probably a reason why. But I don't think it's a bad thing to question. Well, I don't think we should take something for fact or for as authoritative just because someone else says we should.
Is that testing, right? We're supposed to test
Yeah,
things.
test and see. I mean, what is it?
right.
Be like the Bereans who.
Yep. Good. Anybody else have any other comments about that? So through the Pentateuch and the establishment of the covenant and the law, do you see grace, and how do you see grace in that? and that's another breakout room type of a question. How are you seeing grace in the midst of the giving of the law and what we've read in Exodus, basically Genesis through Deuteronomy, but particularly Exodus through Deuteronomy? How are we seeing not just the law side of it, but grace in the mix and in the middle of it? Okay, so sending you out to a room. Have to get back to my breakout rooms.
20 minutes-ish, say?
Oh yeah, that's a good, it's 7. Let's go. Is 10 minutes too long for you guys to discuss that? I don't want you to just sit there going, oh my gosh, I'm just in here forever. But I also don't want to cut you off. Is 10 good?
Yeah. We've
Okay,
never
I'm-
had too much time.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna give you till 10 after, and then actually, guys, we'll come back all together at quarter after. So take about a 5-minute break. And if you're done discussing, and if you want to discuss to quarter after and you need till 20 after, that's fine. All right. So after this breakout is a 5-minute break.
Deal.
Great. I'm coming. Okay, are we gathering back in? Oh, hang on a second. I gotta put my ears back in. All right, I think I might be able to hear you now. I think Northside you're there, but I don't think anybody else has come back yet, so.
Yeah, we're here and ready,
All right,
but still rolling. We'll shut
are
it
ya?
down when you're back,
Okay.
yep.
Well, when you start seeing people pop in, when we get the majority of us back in, then I'll call you in, but you can keep on going if you want.
I can hear you, so once you start talking.
All right. There we go. Can you all see the whiteboard?
Yes.
Okay. Well, maybe you can anybody kind of in a nutshell wrap up for me or let me, because I haven't gone into your rooms to kind of listen in on your conversations. We asked the question, what can we learn? No, what question did I ask you?
It was about the graceful between Exodus and
Yeah.
Deuteronomy.
There it is. There it is. So, what kind of nuggets did you get from that? Any ahas or any questions?
We've when I was with the guys, we talked about how the God was graceful and Jordan. And we were talking about how God was graceful with the Ten Commandments and the laws and stuff, and how Moses was graceful that Moses went up to the tree to talk to it, even if it was in a bunch of flames.
Hmm. Good. Any other comments or any other thoughts that came in out of your discussion groups? I think you might have to unmute.
Are you talking to us today?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know if you were talking to the rest of us or if you were, I saw your mouth moving, so.
Oh, no, we made a whole list, and so I was just gonna drop the whole list in the chat, just
Oh, awesome.
just for fun. But it is not very pretty now that I paste it. Oh, my goodness.
That's great. I love it. Sacrifice gets, yes, golden calf. Yeah. Wow. Not just, yes. There it is, kinds. Person. Holy cow, you guys. That's great stuff.
Yeah, no goofing off over here. Only work.
No, man, you went for it. Good for you. Excellent. Well, that's kind of what I was hoping would come out of some of that discussion. So thanks for sharing that. That's really great. Can you all see the whiteboard? I have to admit, I need to invest in a pen or something because I'm doing that with my finger, and it's pretty. Well, I'm a kindergartner in the Old Testament, so there you go. But if you'll look at this right
That's pretty
here.
good for your finger, though.
That's my finger, man. Okay, so I wanted to just talk with you briefly because when you get into Exodus 20 and it starts with the passage that says, and God spoke all of the words to say, or in other words, he said all these things, and he goes, I God or Lord, the God of you who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slaves. And then it says, let not there be any other gods before me. And when we're talking about this grace concept and the revelation of the character of God throughout our weaving throughout our whole Old Testament, one of the interesting things is the discussion about the 10 commands or the 10 sayings and where those, like how the different traditions line them up. Do you remember that graph that I can't remember which professor gave that to us. I think that was Richardson, maybe. But the graph that he set out, and it's like, here's how the Jewish tradition lines up the commands, and the Catholic and Lutherans and the Protestant Orthodox and Anglicans. And I can put that up. I have a picture of that, and I can share that screen. But I want you to, one of the things that I think is really interesting, and maybe you already know it, but this is the name for God, and it means basically it's a being verb. It's a verb, and it means to be, right? And so, and in the tense that it's in, it means to, it's almost the idea of like, I was, I am, and I will be type of thing. It encompasses all of that. So we have texts like in Revelation and in other places where you are the God who was, you are the God who is, you are the God who will be, things like that. And that's really encompassed in the proper name of God. The Jewish, an Orthodox Jew, and especially in ancient Near Eastern times, but even to this day, they won't utter this name because they revere it so deeply. Like, you don't say the name of God, his proper name. And they would consider this, we say Yahweh, but they won't say that. And that consonant can be either a w sound or a v sound, depending on what's around it and things like that. Because they wouldn't say that, they, in place of that, put Adonai, which means Lord, and it's just a basic master or Lord type of a name. So when they're reading along and they come across this proper name of God, they just automatically read Adonai, or they may read the word Hashem. And they just place it in there. It's not in there, but they place it in there so that they don't say the proper name. And like I said, Adonai, it has the connotation of Lord. And that's why in our English text, we will see that capital Lord. When you see that, that means that that's really this name right here, but it shouldn't be uttered in some ways. And so, and sometimes they'll, like I said, they'll replace it with Adonai or Hashem, and Hashem just means the name. So kind of like, can't say it, but it's that name, and they keep on going. So, but as time went on and things like that, in order to not utter this, but get the connotation of God and Lord, they mixed the vowels of Adonai with the consonants of Yahweh. And you come up, so when you take these vowels and you kind of put them under where they would have vowel points, not English vowels, of course, but you get this Yah, Ho, Va. Have you ever heard that before? Jehovah, right? And so that's kind of where we get that Jehovah. And then obviously, there are several times in the Old Testament that God reveals himself, Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Nissi. I'm trying to think of there are a lot of that name in front of an adjective that describes, and of course, each time it's particular to what is happening and what the story is about and how God is revealing another aspect of his character. But I thought that was just interesting. So when we come in our English text against up to this, it will often just say Lord. some of our English texts may put in Adonai, but they may put in Jehovah too. So at the beginning of Exodus 20, where where we have this, the start of the 10 commandments here, we have God saying, I got to get to it so I read it right. Then God spoke all these words: I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And this is where I'm going to go ahead and put up this. I hope I still have it here. Oh, here we go. I'm going to take this down. Bear with me while I'm doing my shifting, but I'm going to share with you my screen. Oh, that's hilarious. I can't, remember how I'm working on 2 different computers? That's awesome. Just a second. You're going to think I'm crazy and I'm going to take you for a ride. Can you see? Is that all just white? Do you remember that image? Anybody remember that image?
I remember the image. It looks
Okay.
familiar when I watched the video
Yeah,
again.
it was in one of the lectures. But so for the Jewish culture and tradition, I should say, not for the culture, but for the tradition, for the Jewish tradition, they actually take one, I am your Lord your God who take you out of the land of Egypt, out of slavery. They take that and they don't make it really a command. It's like an overarching statement, and then their first, or I guess it's part of their first command. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It's part of their first command, but instead of it being a command, it's like this. It's a saying, and then it goes into have no gods and have no other idols. And the idea behind that is that God establishes and reminds them of his relationship with them before he just jumps into announcements or pronouncements of the thou shalt not, right? Those type of statements that we start heading, no idols, no graven images, and going on like that. And so in the Jewish tradition, they see that kind of as the first saying of God. And I'm moving some of my notes around here so I can get to them all. And in some ways, that softens or at least couches these commands in relationship rather than just starting off with just a pronouncement of what the Israelites are supposed to do. And when we go back to the conversation about whether we think the law is harsh or not, to me, that's one way that I think when in English and in our English translations, we just start off with, I'm the Lord your God. I took you out of slavery, and you shall have no other God before me, and no idols. And it's just all kind of woven together. And I think sometimes we miss the beginning of it that sets it in relationship instead of just a command of what I need to do in order to be right with God. He's saying, I've started this, and I've taken you out of slavery, and I am the Lord your God. And because of that, here are the guidelines for how you function in a relationship with me that's sustainable. Right. And I like that. The Catholic and the Lutheran traditions, they kind of put all three of those, they kind of bring all three of those together. Protestant, Orthodox, Anglican traditions kind of use that a little bit as a preface, and then they focus on their first command is the no other gods and no idols, and second command is no idols. So it's interesting that there are different such differences in the way the commands are, or the 10 sayings are laid out and how people understand them. But we don't often talk about how the Jewish tradition has viewed it. And I think that gives us a little bit of insight. And for me, that brings in the grace, right? It's not just about the law, it's about the relationship that I have with the God who's setting out these. And I think, Jordan, I think you said your group kind of talked about that the commands are about. Hi, Jordan, tell me again, are you there, Jordan?
I sure am. What are you asking?
You in the break, you kind of told me what your group was talking about in light of the grace that you found in the commands. And I think you said something to this effect. Do you remember what you told me?
I said that our group talked about how in the Old Testament specifically, and I mean the New Testament too, grace shows up in like God's people or the people he chooses to serve, he chooses to use to serve and stuff like that. And the Ten Commandments are a perfect example of God's grace because when you have if you have a loving father, that loving father isn't going to let their child eat cupcakes every morning, right? And the child is going to think that that's horrible and that their dad's the worst and stuff like that. But the father knows that that isn't going to be good for them. And a loving father is going to correct them. A non-loving father wouldn't correct them and wouldn't care. So God's grace and God's love is being shown through the commandments and in that he cares by giving those commandments and giving correction. So that was what I had talked about with you. But
Okay. I guess that's kind of what I was thinking about, but again, it's all couched in the relationship. So have you guys ever heard the phrase rules without relationship leads to rebellion? Some of I've in the parenting circles and parenting books and things like that. I've read that and heard that so many times, and there's truth in that, right? I can speak something to a student or to a camper or to somebody I'm directing. I can speak something into them, and even something that's difficult to be spoken, when I have a relationship with them to be able to do that. When I don't have a relationship, it comes off as just another, like me just kind of thumbing them, or just it actually kind of almost breaks, and then oftentimes it leads to kind of thumbing your nose at somebody or whatever. You're in relationship, we trust the love and the care between the people relating, or obviously between God and us. And so when he establishes his law, and he establishes that in who he is, then and what he's done for his people to draw them, then that reminds them, this isn't just, I'm not just another God just giving you all these things that you have to line up. And it's not about being legalistic. This is about being in relationship. And so I like the Jewish tradition of how they kind of separate that first saying out. It's their first command, but they wouldn't call it a command, they would call it a saying. And the first saying is, I'm a God, I'm your God, I have a relationship with you, I've called you, and this is what our relationship looks like. And here's your part of this relationship. And I think that's beautiful. Anybody have any thoughts or comments about that?
Oh,
I'm gonna go ahead.
I have thing idea on that. My art teacher, she goes to a synagogue in Sioux Falls, and she talked a lot about this. And I told her, what you did that where you're learning the books, and she was talking about this, and she goes, the Jews look forward on that first one just as a saying and not as a actual commandment, which is I felt like that was kind of strange, but
Mhm.
from I heard it from the way you explained, I understand now what she's saying.
Yeah, good. I'm glad that gave some insights. Okay, so this is not my own either, but this is, I think this is part of the heart behind the commands as well. And I just wanted to share it from you. I first learned this from a book by, I think it's either Dobson or Josh McDowell. I can't remember. But but the concept is every precept, which is a law or a teaching or a laid out guidance, piece of guidance, every precept, behind every precept, there's a principle. So let's play this. Join in me. If I say, what's the principle? Am I spelling that word right? What's the principle behind the precept of thou shalt not lie?
Honesty?
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Good
So
truth.
yeah, truth. Which is, yeah, honesty is the playing out of truth, right? But truth, right? We're trying to be honest, truthful, integrity, right? But truth. Behind every principle in biblical terms is the person of God. So if the command is thou shalt not lie, and the principle behind the command is truth, what does it tell us about the person of God?
He is truthful when what he tells us.
He's not just truthful, because truthful is an attribute that you can be, or you can choose not to be.
We can trust
So-
him, have faith
Well,
in him.
but Sandy, you're on the right track. Somebody pick up from where Sandy took off. He is
Just
He is
true.
true. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is the truth. There.
he
I don't
is true. He is
know.
truth,
Okay.
right? So every precept we're given, it reflects the person of God. There's a principle behind it, and that principle will reflect the person of God. Should we do another one? Okay. What's the principle behind that?
Kindness.
Okay.
Person should be God is love, I know.
Joseph, you're jumping ahead.
I'm sorry, we taught this in Sunday school with the kids, not Sunday school, Bible study with the kids a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember what the middle was there, but the God is
Right.
love.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just that, you guys, it's not just that God loves, but he is love. He can't be anything else. He is love. So everything that we see in the 10 commandments, and of course the 10 sayings of 10 commandments are the base, right? That's everything extrapolated out in the rest of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Everything that we see out beyond that it all springboards from these 10, right? And but all of those 10 statements, sayings can be put through this. This is handy, like Joseph, you said maybe in your Sunday school class. This is great to do with young people, because it's kind of like, why do I have to? why is this commandment? Why do I have to forgive? Well,
I remember it wasn't Sunday school. It was the young group Bible study that we're doing on Wednesday nights
okay.
at the church.
Oh, good.
We were
Well, good.
talking about the words of God, and one of the notes and stuff, it had the percent and had what there, and they said love the neighbor. Well, then in the video it said went to the next line, and that came up. Well, then we said he is kindness, so then it came up, and then he said, then how do we describe God? God is love.
Right. Right. So everything stems from the character of God. So when we look at the commandments, then, and we keep this kind of idea in mind, again, he's revealing to us who he is by expecting us to behave and to obey and to follow him and be in a relationship with him. And it all reflects him ultimately, right? So so when we come into the commandments and we start that with the concept that it's in relationship, then maybe that doesn't sound quite so harsh, or maybe so distant as what some say it is. And that's one way to kind of talk about that aspect of our discussion. Luther, in his small catechism, says this. He says, the first commandment is put out like this: thou shalt have no other gods. And he says in his catechism, because it's a teaching tool, what does that mean, children? And the answer is we should fear, love, and trust in God above all things. And the second commandment is recorded as this: thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. And what does this mean, children? And the answer is we should fear and love God, that we may not curse, swear, use witchcraft, lie, or deceive by his name, but call upon it in every trouble, pray, praise, and give thanks. So that's Luther's catechism of how he's trying to help people, and particularly the children, but adults too, understand the commandments. And again, quoting the Grammar of God book, she says, what strikes me most in Luther's version of the first and second commandments is the word fear. And we know there's a nuance of revere and reverence, and you can have a relationship with somebody and be reverent in that relationship, right? But at the same time, in our culture, do we hear reverence when we hear fear? And do children hear that? What do they hear? So she goes on to say, however, the commandments are introduced, whether to children or adults. However, the commandments are introduced, whether to children or adults, the introduction matters because it helps the reader imagine the character of God. Consider the possibilities. Is God a God who announces himself, who simply lays out who he is for the listener's understanding, or someone who starts out stern and clear with a prohibition against competition? What kind of God is he? Thou shalt not have any other gods before me. It is a choice too between beginning with a positive command and a negative one. So those were interesting thoughts when I'm thinking about how we view the commands, and in light of it really being a relational covenant that we're talking about, not just a legal beagle document, right? It's not a contract between us and God, it's a covenant that God's establishing with us. So, do you guys have anything else to say, or any questions that you have about the 10 Commandments? And we could go several nights on just the 10 Commandments alone, but I want to jump to a couple other concepts tonight too before we're done. So, anything else that you guys want to touch on or have any questions on? One of the things in the Jews, I'm going to jump to the next, and a couple of my final thought here, but one of the things in the text, as you are discerning and reading the text, is in Jewish tradition and in the Hebrew, there's a a phenomenon of, phenomenon, but it's a what neighbors around a statement matters. Like what neighborhood that statement lands in matters. And so, we talk about context. What's Paul saying to the Philippians in the middle of Philippians 2? What's happening in 1? What's happening in 3 and 4? What's the whole context of Paul? Where's he at? Where's his audience at? You kind of go out and out, further and further out to try to understand that context. And we do that all the time. We just kind of do that naturally. Who is the audience? Who's the author? When's the date? All that type of stuff. But when you look at what neighbors in the context of like the commands, if you look at the text where it talks about honoring your parents, so let's go to that. Start with the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day in verse 8, keep it holy. 6 days you labor, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son, your daughter, keeps on going. For 6 days the Lord made heaven and all that is in them, but rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the command and day and the Sabbath day and consecrated it. And then he goes into 12. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that your God is giving you. And then you're into you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery. And those our English text put those 13 through 16, they put them separate. The Hebrew text actually puts those all together. So those are all neighbors. And remember the Sabbath day and honor your father and mother are neighbors in the Hebrew text. So if you're talking about this idea of neighbors, why would the Hebrew text have honor the Sabbath and honor your parents as neighboring texts? What does that tell us anything? Can we understand anything in light of that?
I have heard that fourth commandment, the Sabbath, sometimes referred to as the hinge commandment. Like it transitions us from the vertical to the horizontal. And taking a Sabbath, actually, it's not only good for us, but it's good for those around us, because it allows us to be in a position to have healthy relationships and maintain those. It gives us that break that's necessary to rest and recharge, so that we can enter into those like deeper neighbor type of relationships.
Yeah, and wouldn't that also be familial relationships?
Absolutely.
So it makes sense. I've heard that too, that's kind of your hinge text between, the first command's all talking about our relationship with God, and the last command's talking about our relationship with others. And that's definitely a valid way to look at this the whole text of the commands. But those two neighboring each other, I think you're right, Lawson. When we take time set aside and put away the agendas and the busyness, especially in our day and age, right? But I'm sure that they were busy in that day and age too. When we put that aside, we not only have margin for God to speak into our lives and for us to have time with God, but we make margin for those closest to us as well. And for the Sabbath in the Jewish culture, that was a family thing. You came home to the house, and that's kind of where you stayed, and you were with family. And that's a huge tradition that that family piece of it was a big piece of the Sabbath celebration or remembrance as well. And so that kind of does make sense that those two would neighbor each other. It's interesting that we aren't commanded to love our parents. And the word for kabed, the word for honor, is the Hebrew word is kabed, et avika, ve'et emika. And the word kabed is an imperative verb, and it is related to the noun kaved, and that noun means heavy. It means heavy. There should be some heft to the way we feel about our parents. Treat your parents with heft. Jordan. The verb kabed is frequently translated as honor, and if that's accurate, it's an accurate translation, right? But honor has some heft to it. It has we don't use the word heft very much, but we use the word weightiness. There's a weightiness to the way we should relate and treat our parents. The root kabed should not be ignored. The idea is to treat your parents with heavy consideration, to make sure they have a serious place in your life. And Lawson, coming back to the Sabbath, when you're in with your family and you have a chance to relate with all the busyness put aside, you hear each other differently, right? It's not just about the agenda of the day, but you get to have conversations that you don't otherwise get to have. And my question for you then is, for all of us, is how well do you Sabbath? Yeah, Sandy, go ahead. I gotta ask you to unmute. I don't hear you.
Okay.
There you go.
How do you spell the Hebrew word? Is it how do you
It
spell
would be Kabed. That'd be the
Kabed?
yeah, that's the Kabed.
Okay.
It's like it's the English
Um,
transliteration, but it's not,
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And
All
then
right.
the noun version, the B turns to a V kind of a sound. So it's a vav instead of a actual bait
Okay.
there.
I get it.
All
All
right.
right.
So
Very
the
good.
question I asked you guys is, how well do you Sabbath? How well do you Sabbath? And that is a question I'm not going to put you into a group on. That's a question I'd like you to spend the week pondering. How well do you Sabbath? And for, the Jewish tradition, that of course starts at sundown on Friday and goes through Saturday and things like that. And but Sabbath is an intentional time of coming away and setting aside normal agendas. And that 24-hour period, it would be awesome to be able to have. And yet that can be really hard to come by. But could you Sabbath in other ways? Is there a way to have some kind of a Sabbath in the course of your week? Whether it's a whole day or maybe it's an intentional 3 or 4. Oh, what a cutie. So that's a question I'd like you to ponder in the course of this week. How well do I Sabbath? And what would it take for me to start that Sabbath practice? I wanted to kind of talk with you about 13 through 16, but I really want, before we leave, I want to go all the way to Deuteronomy. Because I want to just tell you a story around it, but I'm going to read it for you, and then I'm going to challenge you with something, and then I know we've got just a couple minutes, but chapter 34. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho, and the Lord showed him the whole land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, and the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negeb and the plain, that is the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. The Lord said to him, "This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there." And we all know that harkens back to his antsy hitting the rock, right? And God said, that's going to cost you. And there's all sorts of questions about that. Here's this servant that has followed him and yet can't overlook that. But there's people, we have consequences, and God still loves. Parents give consequences, but they still love you, right? So then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the Lord's command. He was buried in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Bet Peor, but no one knows his burial place to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His sight was unimpaired, and his vigor had not abated. The dude was still going. The Israelites wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days, and then the period of mourning for Moses was ended. And Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands on him. And the Israelites obeyed him, doing as the Lord had commanded Moses. Never since has there arisen a prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. He was unequaled for all the signs and wonders that the Lord sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all his servants and his entire land, and for all the mighty deeds and all the terrifying displays of power that Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. And we end the Pentateuch with this basically a eulogy in some ways of Moses, right? And we know that Moses is one of the main characters in the whole course of the Pentateuch, and in this Mosaic covenant, right? He's one of the central characters. But remember, we've also said that that God is the central character overall. Like he's the main character. He's the reason, right? When I was doing my graduate studies, I left a ministry after 10 years in a ministry, and I went to do graduate studies. And I had done Hebrew as a senior in Bible college, but I had not really grappled with the Hebrew text since. So I'm 10 years away from any Hebrew. And you know that the phrase, you don't use it, you lose it, right? And so I went into my graduate studies, and they signed me up for intermediate Hebrew. And I went and talked with my advisor, who happened to be the Old Testament prof and the Hebrew professor. And I said, you've got a mistake here. I haven't done Hebrew seriously for about 10 years, and I can't be in your Hebrew intermediate class. I'll fail, and I don't want to fail a class, my first goal in my master's program. And he kind of smiled at me. He said, you did your undergraduate at Minnesota Bible, right, Tay? And I said, yes, I did. And he said, he named my professor, and I said, yeah, that's who I studied with. And he asked me my grade, and I told him I had gotten a good grade. And he said, you're going to be fine. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And we get into the first class, and his first class was nothing but, he walked in the room and he said, write the Hebrew alphabet, and he walked out. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Yeah, that's all I had. 10 years, it's been too long. And I went back into him and I said, I'm gonna fail your class. I gotta get me on here. He says, no, you're gonna be fine. And I'd like to see you. We'll see what your later tests are. So we get to the end, and I started picking up again and remembering and things like that. We get to the end, and our final test was, we walked into class with the Hebrew text, and one commentary type of lexicon type of help. And he gave us a text that we had to translate, and it was Deuteronomy 34. And I am like, oh my, and at the beginning, it's kind of okay because, it's all these places, and places are easy to translate. Oh, that's Moab. Oh, that's Pisgah. Okay. And you kind of know where it's going. I'm sitting in this class with all these graduate students, and I get to the place where verse 5, where it says, then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the Lord's command. And verse 6 in our English text says, he was buried in the valley in the land of Moab opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows his burial place to this day. And the Hebrew actually says, and he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab. And he buried him. And you guys, I just started weeping because I couldn't believe what a compassionate, tender God we have to honor the body of his servant. Like, would it have mattered in the grand scheme of things whether Moses's body was actually buried? In the culture, yeah, that did matter. To God, why would that matter? Except for honoring his servant. And I think my professor thought I was weeping because I was failing the test. But I was weeping because I was so taken back by the goodness and the compassion and kindness of our Father. And so as you're studying and as you're kind of getting through and trudging through your videos and your readings and trying to get it all done and things like that, please don't miss the heart of God in the course of your studies. And then my other thing to you is just to encourage, there's a reason I keep on coming back to some of the original language, and I am no Hebrew scholar by any means. But I'm telling you that the study, if you are in a degree program and you're seeking a degree and they give you the option of whether you're going to take a Greek or Hebrew, I'm hoping that some of this whets your appetite for diving into the original languages, because that is a study that is just so rich and beautiful. So want to encourage you in that way. And then there's a lot of helps if you haven't studied the actual languages, lots of helps, the Logos software and commentaries and lexicons and things like that, where you can dive in to the original and be blessed by that. But above all, don't miss the character and the beauty of your Father through the thickness of trying to get all this studying done. Make sure you're taking time as you're reading to pause and reflect and let God speak into you. And I hope that in these last couple weeks you've had some moments like that. And if you haven't, slow it down a little bit. If you don't get everything read, okay. But if you dive in and God just really reveals himself to you, that's what this is all about. And that's what our Old Testament is really about. That's what he wants. He wants to reveal himself to us through his covenant, his word. So blessings on your week. If you're auditing, you can bolt if you want to. I'll stick around here for a few minutes if you're for credit and you have some questions about tasks and assignments and things like that. I'm happy to answer that too. Thanks a lot for your time, you guys. I hope you found tonight helpful and encouraging.
Thanks, Dave.
It was on you. That was, you need to make this point.
If you guys don't have any questions, I'm going to end this. I've got to get to a board meeting for Pine Haven. It started about 7 minutes ago. So I can't hear you.
Oh, when I was talking about the sociology, I talked with my instructor and he says what he was getting at. He was getting at explaining to me how I got mixed up. It was on the situation of the sociology within the Bible.
Okay.
That's the lesson that we're gonna come up and learn. He goes, not that. I kind of got that mixed up because I was mentioning your name and then I go learning this. And I said we're starting with this, and I said I looked at the stuff and was showing him the stuff that always came up to me, and he was just talking about it. He said, "No, no." And I told him about that today. He goes, "No, no, no, no. I didn't mean it that way." But he says, "You get any questions about religious? You go, since I'm taking the class. You know who to ask the." There, I'm gonna be the guinea pig during that lesson of the religious lesson of sociology.
Okay, so your capstone project will be focused on some of the concepts that we've presented to you then.
Yeah, I've talked with Sandy. We're gonna do a Passover meal, and she said she'll do it in her small group. And since I'm not part of her small group, I'll go to her small group so we can get that done together. So we've talked about it.
Okay.
She said we'll set that up and get that done when it gets closer. She said.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot, Joseph. I gotta bolt.
Yep, I do too. My supper's getting cold.
Okay, bye.
Bye.